Hi, I'm Andrew Sheps, and welcome to Bounce Factory. This is the first video of a series that will show you how to use Bounce Factory to make your life easier. Bouncing mixes, bouncing stems, basically anything you do in Pro Tools that involves the bounce mix dialog. So, Bounce Factory is an app that I've written in SoundFlow, which is a fantastic platform for automating Pro Tools, and I will now walk you through it. The basic idea in Bounce Factory is you take a snapshot, which is a picture of your session at the time you take the snapshot, and we'll talk about exactly what data is in the snapshot in a minute. And then based on that snapshot, you can then bounce various mix passes of your session and put them in folders and import them and export them and do all kinds of stuff. And it's all automated, and it does it while you sleep. If you go to sleep, it'll do it while you're awake if you stay awake. What we've got here in the middle of the app is the list of where all of our snapshots will be once we've taken them, and then some buttons that allow you to manipulate that list. And then at the bottom, you've got buttons for bouncing these snapshots once you've taken them and the settings of how they will be bounced. But first, let's take a snapshot. That's the big green button up here. I'm going to click Take Snapshot, and the app is going to go through the session and grab some information that will help fill out the dialogues for you the way you had your session set up before we started. It's grabbing the bounce dialog setup. It's going to grab the export audio setup. It's telling me right now that I haven't made a timeline selection. This is just a safeguard. If you don't have a timeline selection, it will bounce the entire session. I'll just go ahead and make a selection because why not? And it's going to grab a little bit more data. Then put your screen back exactly how you had it, and bring us to the snapshot window. So what you see should be familiar to you. This over here is basically the bounce mix dialog from Pro Tools with some additional features and some added bonus circles over here, which I'll talk about in a second. This is the export clips as files dialog that comes up when you select a clip and you want to export it in a different format. And then you've got buttons here for the additional settings. So the bounce dialog in Pro Tools will grow and different panels will open depending on what formats you've got, rather than having this be a dynamic size, which would make some of the more advanced features harder to draw and things like that. I've decided to make this dialog a fixed size, and then the additional settings that you need when you're bouncing to video or Atmos, let's say, or you're bouncing an MP3 are accessible through buttons here that will become available as you choose formats that require them. So if I change my format from WAV to MP3, the MP3 settings for the bounce show up right away. This dialog is exactly what you get in Pro Tools. But one kind of cool thing is in the genre pop-up, you know, there are 500 choices and you have to scroll through and find them. You actually get one of the great SoundFlow search dialogues because everybody wants it to be booty bass. And we say close, and you'll notice that this button is now available, so I can go back into these settings anytime I want and change what's going on, and then I can keep them. Now, if I go back to Wave, all that will happen is that button will be disabled because those settings are no longer relevant to the snapshot. Okay, up here we've got the file name, the file type, and the mix source. So this is the same as you have in the Pro Tools Bounce Mix dialog. Here is the audio portion of the dialog, and it's everything you're used to seeing. When you bounce in Wave, you can choose interleaved or split, your bit depth, your sample rate, and whether or not you're bouncing offline. One thing you'll notice, though, is that this text here is green. What this indicates is that you are actually bouncing at the session sample rate. And that means that import after bounce is a valid thing, and that is green as well to let you know that you're doing it. So there's a little bit more of a visual indication of what's going on. If we change this sample rate to a different sample rate than the session, it will be orange. And what orange will indicate in this dialog is that it is a valid setting, but there is functionality that you do not have access to because of the setting. So what this also brings us to are these nice colorful circles. These allow you to make settings based on some information that the app already has. So L, the pink ones, are the last snapshot. Now, we haven't taken a snapshot yet, so there isn't really any data that's available that would be relevant. But once we've taken a snapshot, we can refill the dialog with all of the settings from the last snapshot we took. So if we're bouncing an entire record, we can open up the first song, set up this dialog exactly how we want it. Then when we move on to the second song, we can just hit the L here to fill the entire dialog, And that will give us a starting point that was exactly the same as the previous song. You'll also notice that the L's are next to a couple of individual parameters in case you only want to recall one thing from that previous snapshot. S is the session settings. This is what it gathered before we got to the screen, so it's how you had the bounce dialog set up last, how you had the export dialog set up last, or in this case, what sample rate the session is. And then the T's are to get information from the currently selected track, which I'll show you in a second. So rather than have to know that this session is at 48K, I can just click the S and it will set the sample rate to the current session sample rate. Then you'll notice that import after bounce has gone orange to say, hey, I'm available, but you're not doing me yet. And if I click import after bounce, that will turn green, and now export copy after bounce becomes available as an option, but it is not yet selected. And when I select that, now that goes green. So this is a chain that goes from the sample rate to importing to exporting. So obviously, if you're not at the session sample rate, you can't import. And if you can't import, you can't export. If you are exporting, then this is like after you've mixed, you've brought the file into the session, you select it in the clip list, you say export clip as files, and then you set a file format, which could be MP3 or WAV. Interleaved, it can be all kinds of things. It can be a QuickTime as well, AIFF if you're doing vintage audio files for some reason. And again, any sample rate, any bit depth, and you can choose a destination directory for your export. And then over here on your importing into the session, you've got, first of all, in the location dialog, you've got the session folder or directory choices for where you want to put the file on disk. Then down here is the import destination. And this is like the dialog that comes up that says, do you want to import to new track or into the clip list? So you've got those choices. But another thing you'll notice is you can actually import to an existing track. So I'm not going to go ahead and click that yet. But what the concept is rather than just importing into the clip list, when I print my mixes, I like them all to go on playlists on my print track. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of my session, which is where my print track is. I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to talk about these last buttons, which are T. If I click the T button next to the destination track pop-up, even though it's not enabled, this app is smart enough to say, oh, well, you want to import it to the currently selected track. I will go ahead and change the import destination to existing track, and it's going to go onto my Bounce Factory demo print track. What this will do, the way the dialog is set up right now, is it's going to bounce a mix called Bounce Factory Demo at 48K 24-bit. It's going to bounce it into the bounced files folder offline. It is then going to import it into my session, into the clip list initially. Then it will go to the BF demo print track, make a new playlist called Bounce Factory Demo, drag it out of the clip list and put it onto that playlist, and it will export a copy of the file to this destination directory, which at this point is the default audio files folder. But obviously you could put that into a refs folder on Dropbox or something like that, and your export is done automatically. So that is the standard snapshot that lets you define your type of file that you want to bounce, where you want to put it, what do you want to do with it afterwards? Do you want to bring it into the session? And if you do you want to export a copy? Once you have all of this set up the way you want, you'll notice down here in this list, you got standard mix pass, and it shows you the name, and it's one mix pass. And we'll come back and talk about this list in another video. But we're going to say proceed, and this would bounce the session exactly as we have it and add it to the list. So click proceed. It's verified a lot of settings right there to make sure they're valid. It asks me what I want to put this into the list as. This is the snapshot name, not the mix name that's going to be bounced. So I'll just leave it as Bounce Factory Demo. Click OK. It's going to gather all the rest of the information about the session. And it gives you a little indication of what it's doing here. It's getting extra track info, session track info. Then it's setting your view back, so it leaves your session looking exactly how you had it before. And there you go. Now we have here the Bounce Factory Demo, and the snapshot name is Bounce Factory Demo. It happens to be the same as the session name, but those names obviously do not have to be the same. So now that we've got this list, we have a snapshot here, and you'll notice that all of these buttons are available. We can rename the snapshot, so why don't we call this Demo Snapshot, just to differentiate, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. We can delete it. You can delete all once there's a whole list. And this delete is delete selected, which I'll show you once we have a whole list. You can also import and export all of your snapshots to save them for later. So if you set up an entire record to bounce, but you're waiting to get final approval, then you could do that. You could export those, clear the list, bounce some other stuff, and then re-import them and come back. Once we've got some more snapshots, though, I will show you what to do with them. So that's it for now.